didn't need to be added to this match, period. I didn't think she needed to. I still don't think she needed to. It does add a different element, but man, those just Becky and Ronda by itself was so hot. And, I think because of the inclusion on top of there's many different factors that have cooled her off, and I think will keep her cooled off, even if she does pin, the biggest star in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I think WWE insistence in involving Charlotte in this match is that, kind of like I talked about before with Becky, is to have Ronda not only, lift Becky's prestige, but to lift Charlotte's as well. And I'm with you. I think there's been some convoluted booking in the Becky Lynch to WrestleMania against Ronda Rousey storyline. I mean, they have thrown curveballs and change ups and changed directions and flipped it every which direction to get to where they are right now. But I thought, and on Tuesday this week, I thought Becky, was able to kind of deliver that promo that kind of, in my opinion, it reset the story a little bit. And I think we all need to remember everything that happened up until this point. But I do think that if at WrestleMania she gets the main event spotlight and she goes over to a big pop in front of 80,000 people at MetLife Stadium, I think a lot of that bad booking and a lot of that stuff surrounding her injury just kind of goes away, because fans get the ultimate payoff and she gets to shine in the brightest way possible. Now, I will say this, though. I do agree with you that, Charlotte being in that match, you got to look at the possibility of WWE playing the card of, hey, we're going to protect Ronda. She's going to come back at some point after she has her family, and we want her to be, just as hot as she was before she left. That, to me, would be a mistake of epic proportions. I don't think you can put Becky over in a big enough way, having her beat Charlotte for Ronda's title. She's beaten Charlotte numerous times, 3 or 4 times, in the last 9 months even. And the business that needs to take place at WrestleMania is Becky beating Ronda Rousey in the middle of that ring in front of all those fans. That's the payoff. And I think if that payoff happens, a lot of the booking and the bad promos, I think people can forgive that. If it goes any other way, I think WWE not only is going to have some backlash on their hands from fans, but they're not going to have the biggest star possible in Becky Lynch coming out of WrestleMania on April 8th.
Yep, absolutely, completely agreed. On the air with Zack Heydorn of PWTorch. Again, listen to his audio show, PWTorch VIP, on the canvas. The two things I've always advocated for, I've been doing this show for a while now, are women's wrestling, and now with Impact or TNA leading the example years ago, and now WWE kind of following suit on the main stage, I've advocated for tag team wrestling. I love tag team wrestling. It is so different. Yeah. It adds such a different element to what you're watching. Like at the last pay-per-view, we had 3 tag team championship matches and I believe a 4th tag match period. I can think back to WrestleMania 3 when half the card was tag team matches. That was awesome, and tag team wrestling was over. The last time it was that over, you got to, think back to, the days of the Dudleys, Edge and Christian, and the Hardys, at least on WWE's stage.
Yeah.
Now we're entering an interesting part of tag team wrestling. You have the Dusty Classic, which has been incredible. Now, I don't read spoilers, don't tell me anything, but you have the Forgotten Sons and Aleister Black and Ricochet in the finals, which I think is awesome. That should be an excellent match. You have the Crockett Cup coming back, which NWA, even though I think they've cooled off some, and I totally attribute that to AEW, and it happens. But they have Ring of Honor that they're working with that. AEW is now kind of going on the gimmick of, this is the place for the best tag team wrestling in the world, where now the presumable number 1 and number 2 teams are going to wrestle one another at Double or Nothing. Impact's tag team division has always been solid, always, and especially with the feud with LAX and the Lucha Brothers recently, and the Rascals are coming up, and OVE. They're always stacked with tag teams. What do you think it is in the state of tag team wrestling right now? Like, are we on the cusp of that? I hate to put it in such a corny term because, with the women, are we witnessing another revolution for the rebirth of tag team wrestling? Because we've had Dusty Classics before, but now there's a lot of emphasis on tag teams, which is great. But the only downfall is this generation, not going to be able to give AEW a chance because that WWE for at least 2 generations says that this is all they've known on television. And a lot of it was focused on singles action. What are we witnessing this next boom of tag team wrestling along with the way independent wrestling and wrestling in general is right now?
Well, I think, outside of the WWE walls, I think, we are witnessing a bit of a renaissance in tag team wrestling. And maybe renaissance, is the wrong word, but just kind of, I don't know, renewed interest could be another way to put it. Because, wrestling, if you were a fan of tag team wrestling, if that's what you love to do, like you alluded to, you could find that out on the independent scene if you wanted to. Ring of Honor for years has featured some incredible tag team matchups with the Briscoes and Colt Cabana and CM Punk like back in the day. I mean, like if you wanted to find it, it was out there. I think now it's just a little bit easier to find because the world is much smaller. If you want to catch a great tag team wrestling match from across the pond, you can. It's $8.99, and you just need to sign up for that company's streaming service. So like I think it's more accessible now if you want to see good tag team wrestling. And there's just examples of it, like you alluded to, all over the place in a ton of different companies. I think in NXT there's a platform to present tag team wrestling on a bigger stage and as more important to the company than main roster WWE does. I think on the main roster in WWE, you get Vince McMahon and the writing team going, well, we don't have anything for this guy, we don't have anything for that guy, but man, we need to fill 5 hours of television every week, so let's put them together and we'll call them a tag team. And that's how you get, Chad Gable and Bobby Roode together,
but that's
tag teams like that.
But that's such a piss poor formula. I mean, not that Roode and Gable aren't a bad team.
Yeah.
They're not a bad team. Don't get me wrong, but that's like Val Venus and Lance Storm being thrown together for the World Tag Titles back in the day. It's. I mean, I can name, and you talk about the independents. I can name a bunch of independent tag teams off the top of my head: the Ugly Ducklings, the Apostle Chaos, House Party. Best Friends are in AEW now. The Hooligans. I mean, there is a ton of tag teams right now out there, and yeah, I just wish it was better presented on WWE TV, but I think they're getting there, especially after that triple threat tag match at Fastlane.
Oh, that was fantastic. And I think, like I said, I think that, the one thing that WWE does have is a plethora of talent. And so much so that a lot of times that talent is going to seep through and overcome any kind of, random tag teams or random booking. And I think you saw that in that match. You have a team like the Revival who has been defined, way down. You got Roode and Gable that have been just tossed together, and Ricochet and Aleister Black also just tossed together. But in the end, they know what they're doing in that ring, and they can put on very, very, very good matches, and they did just that. And I think it's one of those things where, like, if you look at the world landscape of tag team wrestling, I think it's a problem when you have to think, okay, hey, the Young Bucks, probably the most popular tag team in the world, can't really go to WWE as a tag team because, if I'm them, I'm just devastatingly concerned about how I'd be used. And I think, because of that, because WWE cuts themselves off from a talent like that, and sure, I know that they offered them contracts and whatnot, but my point is that if I'm the talent, I'm worried about what happens to me if I go to WWE as a popular tag team. I think you can ask Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows about that, and I think they could tell you that, hey, maybe not the best decision in the world in terms of being used properly. The money's great, but if you're looking to be a featured act on the top of a card like you could be in a tag team on the independent scene in other companies, WWE just does not view tag team wrestling in that way right now. That's just not their style of business.
Right, and that leads me to my last point, and we're going to run a little over than what I told you, but um, I think it's important now that you kind of led into this a little bit. Uh, it seems like we're seeing. I mean, we're who knows how valid the Dean Ambrose rumors are because they're talking about it so much on TV. Anderson and Gallows, you just alluded to, they turned down contract offers, for extensions. Ty Dillinger asked for his release, and Tommy got his release. A bunch of others. The Revival were rumored to have asked for their release at one point, and among others. I don't know if it's because it's a hot topic, but I believe there's a lot of validity to it because they're not being used, and they were. You look at Anderson and Gallows; they were a big part of Japan's revival in pro wrestling and being viewed by a casual fan. But that being said, seeing how these talents are looking to they're not extending, and I don't think that WWE has that lure anymore, or they're starting to lose their lure of being able to nag those big top free agent talents, very much like how the Yankees have been lately. Because but they're a perfect analogy. The Yankees and the WWE and their respective entities have the most money that they could spend, and they could have you just for the sake of having you because they don't want anybody else to have you. Now the way that the independent wrestling market is, now we're back in the days of the late 90s, early 2000s where, when I was wrestling, I talked to, people who had been in the business for a long time, and they said, dude, we used to be able to work, 3 days a week, a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, sometimes a double shot on one of those days, and make a genuine living off of it, and that's all we did. Then during the week, we would go and train. And for a long time, that was lost because there was no money in pro wrestling. There was no money to be made in it. Now there's a ton of money to be made in it. And, I look at a guy like Joey Janela, who before his AEW signing was making a living off of pro wrestling, which is what he's always ever wanted to do. With that said, is it going to be that much harder going forward for WWE to get these big name talents? Because obviously they couldn't get Cody again. They couldn't get the Bucks. They couldn't get Kenny. They couldn't get a lot of other talents that they wanted because they see what's out there. Should they be concerned as an organization?
I don't know if they should be concerned, but I think they need to be looking in the mirror and going, okay, AEW is a thing now, and we need to, come to the table with good offers and possibly differently structured offers if we want to, curate a roster that's the best in the world. And I know they're going to have to change the way they go about going after talent because of a competitor in the marketplace. That's just, standard business. I think not just the wrestling business, but any business is like that. If you're a cable company and you've got another cable company coming in, well, you're forced to look at what you're doing and make sure that it's as best as possible to, put out the best product as possible and employ the best people as possible who make the best decisions. And I think the same thing holds true with WWE. The thing that WWE has on its side that other independent companies don't, and even at this point that AEW doesn't really have, is they've got just unlimited resources at this point in time with the television deals that they've signed and all the different seeds that they've planted around the world. Like, they are going to be they're scouring the planet as we speak for the next big crop of talent. As far as like the independent wrestlers, well, they now have a card to play that they never have had before. And well, really, it's two cards. It's one, it's the AEW card. It's a mainstream, or what seems to be a mainstream pro wrestling product that's going to have a big TV deal and a lot of eyes on it. Like, that's a card that's going to help the boys in the back make as much money as possible. But the other thing here is how people and how fans watch wrestling. 20 years ago, if you weren't in the WWE or you weren't in even, a TNA, for example, you didn't have